Hello, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV. It's not really Arnhem Week. It's an Arnhem special, but I didn't change the titles there. So today I'm talking to the author of this absolutely magnificent book here, which I get a hernia picking it up. It's a huge one, full of glossy images, and you'll see better versions of them with the PowerPoint later on. And it is a surefire must-have if you are at all interested in the Battle of Arnhem. The details of the German armored units aren't always well covered by the books about the British forces there. Well, this is the book for you. Absolutely fantastic. And its author, Marcel, joins us now. So I'll bring him in now. Good evening, sir. How are you today?
Good evening, Paul. Good evening, folks out there. Thank you. I'm very fine. Just waiting for your interview, and I'm very excited to be on your show.
Good. And thank you for the book. So the thing about Arnhem is that if you're British, the story is all about the gallant British. It's about, you know, the a bridge too far, the jeeps not arriving. Yes, they did. Some of them did, folks. It's that kind of, it's part of our consciousness. It's part of our understanding of the war. But for the Dutch point of view, there's obviously the civilian impact, but also there's much more interest perhaps in the minutiae of the battle, the details of who, where, when, and what. So the baddies in the Arnhem story, of course, are the Germans that the Allies weren't necessarily expecting to meet, and the German armored units are crucial to that. So tell us about how your whole process began to really pin down the details of the German armored units around Arnhem.
Yes, my beginning of my story is in my childhood when I was young, and I think I'm a little bit older than you, but we were learned to build scale models like airfix and matchboxes, that kind of things. And in the modeling world, we learned to love military vehicles, airplanes, and that kind of stuff. And that's where my beginning of interest lies. Also, with, of course, the book of Cornelis Ryan, Bridge Too Far, which I lent from the library. And that triggered the interest in the battle that took place on in our land, or in our country, in Arnhem. And later on, that became more and more interest, and it's the modeling hobby which triggered me to do more and more research, to find more and more information. And in that case, I started an investigation to search for the photos I saw in books like Cornelis Ryan, or for me at that time, the new book of Robert Kershaw, It Never Snows in September, because I noted that some of the photos were almost equal, but slightly different. And by visiting the Airborne Museum and talking with head corrector Adrian, who worked there, he told me, he pointed me in the direction of the Bundesarchive, archives in Arnhem, Oosterbeek. And that way I learned a lot, but it was also always to build better and nicer models. And one guy in Oosterbeek, he worked at the archive in Oosterbeek, Geert Maassen, he always triggered me to do more with the material I collected in those days. And that went to the first booklet, you know, all from Concord. That was a simple one because I'm not a writer by nature, just like to puzzle, find things and that kind of stuff. And that led to a reasonable simple book like the Concord book, and that gave me a lot of understanding, and a lot of people correct me about a lot of things, and I learned a lot about that, and that goes on, and goes on. Yeah, that's
And the product of your work is here in this PowerPoint. So we're going to hand it over to you, folks. Fire away with questions, but we're going to kind of hear about how he put the book together, what sort of photos are in it, and really what it covers. But I'm over to you, sir.
Yeah, what I find most important, and that's something I do in my normal life, I'm chairman of a couple of clubs. And what I like to do is combine people to do something together, to make something. And what you here see, that's in the back of the book, that are a lot of friends of mine, and that are all friends who help me, all with their special interest in some things. And they all help me to put the book together. That's why I found it very important to show them to my public in the book, and give them a place to show my grateful to them and say thank you. And without them, there was no book. what started the book, what's most important, if you go in the left, right, that's Bob Gerritsen. I went to him in the beginning 10 years ago and thought about the idea to make a new photo book about Arnhem. Because the photos, that triggered me all the way, but that went an all other way. If you go to the photographs, for example, my first book, as I told, triggered some things, and one of the things that triggered was a guy in America I know very well, Remy Spezzano. A lot of you also know him from SZM Publishing, and he showed me after the publication of my first book this kind of photos. It were a lot of more, but those were completely new to me. And as you see, the quality is very bad, but with a lot of patience, I get the real photos like this, and some are in the book, and you see the very good quality. These are Kriegsberichte photos of a German pers photographer, and are very good in quality. His name was Stechelschied, and we have a complete series of them. And that kind of photos, what I found because of my first book, triggered me to do more. What also triggered me is the aerial photo we all know of the bridge, one of the three. This is a photo I could lend from the Airborne Museum. They had a first a high quality print of the photo, and I let it scan in very high quality so I can study what's on the photo, and that started a new investigation, what happened really on the bridge. That's also very deeply covered in the book, but there was a long time ago also a sort of article about it, and that started by photos like this. This was also a photo of the Airborne Museum. It's in the other direction, but if you see, this photo is much better. I don't think you see it on the screen, but in the book you can see it very clearly. This one was one of the photos I could buy on eBay. And then you get a quality like this. And with this kind of quality photos, you can study and get a lot of details of the fighting, what happened on the bridge. When we go on, we have the other side of the photo. This is also a very famous photo, but none of the main archives who have this photo in their position have it complete or in quality like this. This is also, again, a picture of the screen from eBay. If you see it like here and in the book, it's a very clear photo. And again, searching for photos like this one also triggered a very interesting moment. If you see, this photo was placed on the internet, like it is here, with the logo wiped away. And with a little research, we find the archive, what was in the logo, it was pushed away, and with that information we started to search for the archive and looked what could be managed there. I talked there with a very nice guy, and he said, "Yeah, you can come by, but the photos are restricted." So yeah, that was a little bit of doubt. From do we go by, because the archive was in Ljubljana in Slovenia. In the end, we go there, and with the help of the guy who worked there, Marco, we found a lot of interesting photos, which are in the book. Some of them, not all of them. These are some examples. Very clear scans of also German Kriegsberichte photos, and that goes on. Here, the famous one with Graham, Warwick, and other ones. And so on.
I'm guessing that the thing about studying photos, and I'm thinking about when we have Michael Ackerman on talking about Omaha Beach, is apart from modern Photoshop, photos don't lie, do they? If a photo shows you a particular type of vehicle or tank that we can recognize from its model number, and we see it in a particular street, that's it. That's evidence. Whereas the after-action reports, the war diaries, that can often, of course, contain errors because the human factor was involved. So I think we're in a new era now where understanding the details of aerial photos and photos is critical to understanding the battle, because, as I said, you can't really argue. If you've got a photo of a panther in a particular street, that's it. That panther was there.
Yeah, but it's not always 100% proof. These photos you now see, so for example, the one on the right, that's a real special photo. That's an in-action photo near the Arnhem Bridge, and that's very special. But if you go to the next one, I think, there's this one. This is also Arnhem near the bridge. We now know from investigation that they are pointing their weapons to German positions in the far away. So we now know this is photo just made for the photo. This is not a real situation. Yeah, of course, there are real military soldiers from, I think, maybe SS Panzergrenadier Regiment 21, or maybe some guys from Brinkmann as unit. But the position of the photo, by the position of the photo, we know this photo was made for the photographer. The other photos she showed, that were photos, in real situation. But sometimes it's difficult to understand if it's a real photo or a set-up photo. We don't know always that. But indeed, you have right. If you have a photo of an armored vehicle in a street we can recognize as Oosterbeek or something else, then we know that's correct. But it's always the question, is the photo taken during the battle, after the battle, and after the battle everything was possible, of course. That's always, I don't know if here, this is also, of course, the cover photo. It's a photo of a Marine Kriegsberichter called Hopner. And to determine which date this photo was taken is very difficult. We think September the 20th, but if you say to me it's the 21, I believe you also. We don't know. It's not easy to say which date it has taken. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I just say it's just brilliant photos, and this work is incredible.
Yeah, here you see also one of the lovely things what happened in the 10 years. If you go to the left upper corner, that was the photo how it was placed in my first booklet. It was a newspaper photo, very bad quality, and thanks to my network of friends, out of the blue came a good quality print of the photo you see on the right. So the photo that is used, and that's sometimes you have luck, sometimes you don't. That's also of course. And finding new photos of Arnhem is really a difficult thing. Finding new photos is always difficult, because when you look through all World War II photos in books, it always almost are the same from Bundesarchiv of SCPI in Paris. And of course there are some new archives, but it's not that easy to take to use photos of them. And also what people also forget, that if you want to use photos from, for example, the SCPI in Paris, that costs a lot of money. Yeah. Therefore, also making a book like this is not a cheap option. But that's why I publish it myself, because then I can make the choice of I can say I don't mind it costs money, because I want that photo in my book. I found it very important, and that's the nice way to do things yourself. Yeah.
And between your first book and this new book, were there any particular aspects of the battle that you were scratching your head over? Were there certain details of a particular regiment or a particular engagement that you were struggling with? Because most historians I know who have that niche subject, there are those little subjects that just sit in their head that they can't quite get answers to. I mean, obviously any photo you find is going to be useful, and it'll give you something. Were there particular things that were frustrating you between the two books?
I must admit, when my first book was published, I didn't know, I think, 10% of what I know now, because in the time between, we learned so much about the armor and the vehicles that were used in Arnhem, or the units that used them. And for example, here you look at that Tiger tank, and there are some small details by which you can say it's probably from Zwarts Panzercompagnie Hummel, where it belonged to, and that's our small details. And you see, for example, if you look to the vehicles from the 9th or 10th SS Panzer Division, in first case, I couldn't recognize them from each other. But now we know that when you see a number plate from that vehicles, for example, or on a half track, and it started with the SS stripe 19, we know it's from the 9th SS. If it started with SS stripe 14, we know it's from the 10th SS. That was some information I didn't know when the first book was published. Also, 10th SS have a very remarkable way of numbering their vehicles, especially with the recon unit. They have some, the three-digit numbers are on their front plates as well. That's very unique. Also, something I learned from my members of the Zwarts, that's the second organization for people who like armor, is that the Panzerjägers from SS Panzerjäger Abteilung 9 were covered with concrete. That's a very unique feature that only handles with that unit. So when you see a photo of a Jagdpanzer with concrete, you know it's 9th SS always. Because I didn't know that then, but when I dig deeper in the documents, there is a document of a guy who was writing about that, why they have put concrete on their vehicles, so then you know it's a single one. If you take Sturmgeschütze, for example, they had, it's not standard, but there were more units that had concrete on their vehicles, but in Jagdpanzer terms, it's only 9th SS, and that all things came to my attention after the first booklet, so learned a lot of that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah. Shall we go on with the photos?
Yeah.
Let's see what we have. Yeah, this was also, this is Oosterbeek, Weverstraat. You see something what happens when you are investigating the subject. These are photos. The top one you can get a copy of in the archives. I think this is a Bundesarchiv one or Imperial War Museum one. But the other one, the right photo, in first instance, I bought it from eBay for a lot of money. Later on, there came a guy in England who said, I have a lot of photos and I sell them for fixed prices. Then everyone in the Arnhem world had them. So sometimes you have luck, sometimes you don't. But the main reason for me to buy every time when photos are there is to, in my back of my mind, I can use them for a publication, or some friends of mine can use them for a publication. Because yes, it's nice to show people, photos like this, especially when they are not known, and if you can tell the story behind it, it's especially interesting, of course.
Yeah.
And we go on here, also some new photos. Yeah, I think the quality is very good, and it's very nice to show the people this kind of photos.
Yeah.
My story about the photos is on. Go we on with this chapter, Paul? Or
yeah, let's talk about the maps, because as much as I like the photos, it's the maps that you can never have too many maps.
No,
I sometimes think some books can have too many photos, but you can never have too many maps.
No, the problem with Arnhem and Oosterbeek is it's a very complex matter. Of course, in the end, when the British were defending Oosterbeek perimeter, it was reasonable, simple, but the days lead to that were very complex, because battle took place all over the area.
Yeah.
You go to Oosterbeek, Wolfheze, Arnhem, in the West Arnhem near the bridge. So to give a good idea what happened, you need, as you said, maps, a lot of maps. But to have a clear map, there is, I'm learning from Martin Zwarts, from the books Autumn Gale and Kampfgruppe Walter and that kind of stuff. But he always used wartime maps, and he has a program to put them together and make his own maps. I don't have that. I'm a draftsman engineer in the office, and I'm working with a program that's called AutoCAD. And with that program, I make drawings for my customers I work for. And with that program, I was able to create the maps you see in the books. In this set of slides, I show you how maps were made. First, of course, we have the aerial photos. On the left, that's an aerial photo of September the 6th. So that's reasonable, close to the battle. That's always in my back of my mind when creating maps and that kind of stuff, is to get as close to the date of the fighting as possible. If you go to the map on the right, that's a map from around 39 or something. So the information on the photo is more important. And what then happens is that you see an example of my program, AutoCAD, and on the right bottom you see part of an aerial photo, and you see the red lines. And like in your childhood, you're drawing over other
trace it,
yeah. With that red lines, I put it in my program, and then I try to combine everything I have drawn, and to get it on scale. There is sometimes you have to. You always have to scale down to a particular scale. I work in scale to 1:1. And if you go to the AutoCAD drawing, you see the bridge. That's the long line from the middle to the bottom. That's the bridge, Arnhem Bridge. And from drawings, I show you in a minute, we know that the bridge where the motor vehicles drove was 12 meters wide. So you have a strict measurement what you can use all the way to create the maps. Here you see Nijmegen. Just also you see the map and all the red lines. And at the end you get this. You have the green areas that are wooden areas, the streets, the buildings, and it goes on and on. Here you have an example of a building plan, of the construction plan of the bridge. So you know the dimension of the bridge and everything what's around it. And so you can, here is, for example, a house near the bridge called the Garage, the shop for repairing cars from the brothers van Eeuwen. You see a construction drawing of the building. And with that information, my friend Richard could paint a painting how we think the real situation looked at. And this is the end result, what it became from all those steps. Is that clear or too difficult?
Yeah, no, it's clear.
Yeah.
When you're researching, because you've got aerial photos, you've got maps, you've got German archives, British archives, Dutch archives. Is there one set of material that was, in a sense, more trustworthy? I mean, obviously the aerial photos, as we said, they can't lie, but
no.
Was the German reporting of the battle generally more accurate than the British, or was the British?
No.
Is it all just kind of very random depending on what you're looking at?
No, when you have to look at information, what you get, and try to determine what's the best, is you have to go to ask yourself, how do I explain that? The guy who writes the information down when it's happened is more reliable than the guy who writes information down 20 years later. So when you have a young guy, he's 50-year-old, and he's walking around after the battle took place. On the day there was a battle, and in the evening he walks around with his friends. And after he's walked around, he has a diary and writes in it. That's for me more reliable than a general like Harmel of Harzer, who wrote down their report in the 50s, 60s, because there is too much time, and the guy is focused on a much smaller area than the general. We luckily during the investigation we have found some very interesting reports, and what's really interesting is we call it the log file from the Royal Artillery from the British. There was some clerk behind Hotel Hartenstein in Hotel Hartenstein who wrote down everything, every message he got, and he sent away. And that's in the back of my book. There is an example of that, and that's very accurate because that's a real-time notation of what happens. And we still find it very surprisingly nobody has used that before, because it's very, very interesting. Of course, it's not readable when you first see it, but if you work it out, all the abbreviations, you type out the coordinates and that kind of thing, then it's become a real readable story. And especially for the end, when the battle took part in Oosterbeek, it's very difficult for the guys who fought there say if it was a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Of course, they didn't know that. They were busy with surviving the war, and that's more important than remember what day it was. So if you have the log file with you, it's perfect. It's really perfect to see what has happened. And of course, we have found the parts of the war diary of Kampfgruppe 9th SS. They are very interesting also. That's ad hoc. That's information from what happened at that time. So that kind of information is very trustworthy. And the reports most people, authors used in the past. And then I don't talk about the quality books of Robert Sigmund and his guys, but the old books are all based on the, as we call it, MS reports from Harzer, Bietrich, and Harmel. They aren't that good. There is one MS report that is very good. That's the report of von Tettau. That's good because he has some. When he wrote that report, he had some original documents from his war diary. Therefore, that report we use very much.
Brilliant stuff. I mean, the maps are just, as I say, I'm going to say it again, that they're just absolutely incredible. And I've got some questions, and there's a couple of questions coming, and we'll do for later. But just at the moment, just keep going with what you're talking about the book, and then we'll come to questions.
Okay. Here we have some simple examples from Oosterbeek in map form, what I used. And then we go to the documents. You already spoke about it a little bit. This is what triggered me to do more than the first book. This was when my first book was published. Some guys told me on the forums, why didn't you use the books of Jeff Dugdale? Dugdale wrote some books about panzer strengths on particular months, for example, September and October. And there is very detailed information about how strong the units were. Here you see something of, I can't see it in the small screen, but this is Hohenstaufen. And it goes on very low detail. So how much motorcycles the unit, in this case on the red, you have the Aufklaringsabteilung 9 on September the 3rd, and it's on company level, and it says how much vehicles, how much kubellaars, how much half tracks in what kind of. This is very interesting stuff. So this triggered me to do more, and of course, the problem with Dugdale's book are that they are in English. And an investigator like me always search for the original files. So where did he get this information from? Sometimes, what I said before, sometimes you have luck and sometimes you don't. And in this case, you don't, because I still didn't find the original files where he get his information from. I tried everything. I tried via his friends and everything, but it didn't work out. So the idea to do something with this was cancelled, and that was far before I started Einsatz Arnheim. And but it triggered me to do more with documents, because I said before, the beginning was only to make a photo book, but this kind of things triggered me to do more. You have an example of the log file where I talked about. War diary in the right upper corner, and this is an example of a page. You see on the upper left side, you see all time frames, units where the notation came from, and after that the line which explain what the notation is. And I think you can make a book only of this document. This is so interesting what's written in this document. It's lovely, really lovely. Took me a lot of time to work everything out, of course with the help of a lot of people, because I'm German related, and this is a lot of English stuff, but along the way I learned more and more and more. Very interesting. And we go to this is the MS reports I talked about in all kind of sorts. And you see on the right that some original document in the report of von Tettau, which makes it very usable and very detailed as well. Also, of course, what you said before, there are some mistakes in it, but that's up to us to find them and correct them if that's necessary with proof. This is what the Bundesarchiv looks like today. If you go to Invenio, you can search. That's a search machine of Bundesarchiv. And Bundesarchiv are different departments. You have the Bundesarchiv in Koblenz, that's for the photographs. In Berlin, you have different departments. And in Freiburg, you have the department for military documentation. And you can search on their website for documentation. But if you do that, you think I put in Arnhem and I have everything I want to, then you keep dreaming, because that doesn't work that way. The way that works is that by luck you find a number what's interesting, and then you go on and on and on. You go a number up, a number down, number up, number down. That's very boring work, but it in the end it gives very useful information. And then you get, for example, the war diary, or part of the war diary of Kriegs from the 9th SS. And for example, this is how that looks. The middle one is readable if you read German. The one on the right, far right, as a telex, is also readable, but there's a lot of study to do how, because there are all of signs to show all kind of types of letters. But what's really difficult is the one on the left. It's handwritten and very difficult to read. I think the Kriegstagboek 9th SS has about 400 pages. It took me, with 3 other guys who helped me, almost a year to make almost everything readable, because most of it is what you see on the left is handwritten. Some of this not, but most of it is written in a handwriting that's called Sutelin. That's an old German handwriting, and that's very difficult to understand. And of course, you have all kind of abbreviations, location we don't know, and so on and so on and so on. So a lot of work to make it readable, but when you have it readable, you have first-hand information, and that's what you see in the book every time, again and again and again. And almost no doubt if it's right or not. It's always, most of the time, it's perfectly correct. And if you combine this with the log file from the war diary, there are a lot of similarities.
So we had a question from David about how you took the information from documents and put it in the book to make it readable, because obviously you didn't just translate all the documents and have them there. You've had to make something workable out of the text. So you said that, your intention was to make a photo book, but how do you take all this information and what was the process of putting it into a book? Because you're not a James Holland, you're not an Al Murray, you're not trying to. It's not a storybook in that sense. There is a narrative, but it's more about the investigation and the document. But what was your process?
Yes, that are things that are growing. It's the curiosity you have. If you find a document, people like me are triggered from, hey, that's interesting. And all documents I receive, I write over. I don't scan them like with OCR or so, but I write them over letter by letter, because when I do that, I know it's correct, and I understand the story better. Because when you write, if you read something, you read over a lot of things. If you type it over word by word, every word again, then you are obliged to read it really, really careful and all the way. And my German is a lot of worse as my English here, so that takes time, and I have that time. That's why bookmaking, like I do, takes 10 years, because like the document you see here, that took me 2-3 days to type it over and understand it, and go again back to the Bundesarchiv to look if I can find some extra letters, what was missing. Luckily, most of the documents, if you find them, are scanned, and you can download them from the Bundesarchiv. But you have to find them, and then you have to try to read them, and that takes time. And the time I always take. Time is no problem for this subject. I've never had, I must have to finish the book in 1 year or 2 years or something. No. Work must be done good.
And the other thing about this sort of book is I guess unfortunately there's no end, there's no determination of an end. The end is when you just stop, because if you were saying, well, I'm going to only write a book when I've got every bit of information about the Battle of Arnhem, you'd never get a book, because I'm assuming you'll still be looking for archives the day, you know, the day they nail you in your coffin. That's how I am with Normandy. So I was going to ask this at the end, but I'll ask it now. Your process, did you have an end game of what information you wanted to present? I mean, was there any particular things, aspects of the battle you wanted to sort of put on paper and say, this is what we now know about this German unit? Or was it a case of once you've got enough stuff, you'd kind of release the book? When did you know it was done?
No, I didn't know. The problem is I have friends around me who fit perfectly in what you told a few seconds ago. One of my good friends is Peter Vrolijk. He is also a very keen investigator. He always triggered me to do more and more and more, but he never stops. He never stops, and that's the lovely thing about him, because it goes on and on and on. And But also I told him, Peter, I love to go with you all the way, but I have to stop on a decent moment because I want to finish the book, and that's, for that kind of guys, that's very difficult. But yeah. The problem is when I said I were almost finished, that was the moment I found the war diary of the 9th SS. So there was new information. When I was thinking I'm finished, then I found the war diary of SS Panzergrenadier Regiment Hohenstauf. So that went in it as well. And and at the end, it was what it is. Of course, next year I find new information. We will see. That's.
You can always do a follow-up, a volume 2.
Now we go work on a new book, and that's called Einsatz Arnheim, and that's the rest of Market Garden, and that's in the same sequence as this. Only, the photos is a bigger problem in that book, and it will also take a lot of time. So we will see.
Well, we've got a few more slides, and then we've got some questions. I'm thoroughly enjoying this. The process and what we've discovered is amazing.
Yeah, here's also some documents also of interest. That's these are lists also found on the Bundesarchiv website, but they are restricted. These are lists of recommendations, like Iron Cross first class, second class, lower things. Why is this very interesting? We all know about the Ritterkreuz of Eisernen Kreuz, but there are only a few that were recommended after the Battle of Arnhem. So, but the lower you go in the recommendation, the more names will be on it. And this is very interesting. This I learned from Scott Revel, my Australian friend, to use this kind of information, because in this list you can see exactly what kind of units they give the recommendations to. And if for example, if you go to left upper, that says Kampfgruppe Spindler. Now, Kampfgruppe Spindler only existed in Arnhem and Oosterbeek. So if you have a list of recommendation to people, of soldiers from Kampfgruppe Spindler, you know that units were under his command. So that's why the schematics in my book, of course with the help of Scott, are so precise, because this kind of information is this kind of lists. This is why these are very interesting. This goes on. You see here also examples, and this is why we know so much about the small units that also took place in the battle, also were operated in the battle, and so on and so on. A lot of lists. This is all, of course, just a little percentage of all. And here we see some of the 2nd SS Armor Corps. And this is interesting because this shows that Brigade 280 was not under the command of 9th SS, but under the command of 2nd SS Armor Corps. This kind of list proves that. This kind of, every time, and so on and so on. Also personal files. This is something Bob, my friend, laughs about, because he always says you make a book about tanks and photos and not about the soldiers. But he turned me on to do also the personal stuff. Here we have a personal file of Knaust, of course, famous about his actions near the bridge. He is a younger guy now, and this kind of information also triggers us to dig in deeper in the persons in the battle, and that's why we have in the book also some new names, also triggered by Scott, of course, because he's more into the people and I'm more into the armor, but now I'm triggered to do this kind of things also. Also nice information we found in Berlin. This is Müller, also became a famous name. He was with his SS battalion. Müller was responsible for the center line near the Utrechtse Weg. And here you see from very clear photos when he was at young age with his wife, luckily, long time ago. This is not so nice information, but very useful for the book. This is on the right under corner, you have what's called the complete losses list from a special unit, in this case the SS Panzerjäger Abteilung 9 in Belgium, when they were active near the city of Mons. And in the complete list, on the right side bottom, you have a lot of names, but you also have individual lost lists, and that's on the left side bottom. That's for one person who was lost, and it could be that he was killed or that he was missing in action. And if you see the back side of the card on the left bottom, that's on the left upper. So you have a location where he was missing. You see the little red cross. That's where this guy was missing or killed. I don't know, but one of the way. With this kind of information, you can pinpoint where, in my case, the vehicles were knocked out or probably were knocked out, and how much personnel was lost, and which route they took from Mons to the Netherlands. That you can find with this kind of information.
And do you pose the question first and then find answers to it, or do you find archives first and find out what you can from them? So, for example, if you're looking at a particular street in Oosterbeek and you say, okay, I want to determine how many half tracks and how many Panthers were in that street, do you set those questions up first and then look for what you can find, or do you just do it the other way, or is it a bit of both?
It's the other way around. You find documents, and with that, you write your story. Yeah.
Right.
So no documents, no story, because of course you have some private, of course, eyewitness accounts and that kind of thing, and of course you use that. But if you go in detail like this, you first have the documents, because from a lot of units we don't have this kind of documents. For example, I love to find this kind of documents of the Aufklärungsunit, Aufklärungsabteilung 9, which had losses on the bridge. But they are not found yet. So you will never know. Maybe we'll find them in the future. Maybe they don't exist. We don't know. So this is all extra information I didn't expect to find. And it's all because I have also a good friend, is Piet Duits, and he knows his way around in the Bundesarchiv very well, very well. He knows the persons there who are working, and he has a clearance for everything we like to know, because this kind of information is all blocked, is all restricted. You don't get it very easily. You have to fill in all kind of form because it's personal information. Piet has that clearance, and he helped me with this kind of documents. That's why where I started our conversation with. The people who helped me are very important to me, because without them, I never had access to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have more illustrations. Some people also like that, to talk about it. We have, of course, some paintings in the book. We have in the middle a painting from Richard Brouwer. He liked to paint for his hobby, and he gave me the option to paint some paintings which illustrate the battle on the bridge, because we of course have no photos of that, and that helped. And I asked when the book started, I had good contact with Ron Volstead, a good illustrator from Canada, a lovely guy. Met him once, and a very, very nice guy. Makes beautiful paintings for modeling firms like Dragon in figures and vehicles, but it wasn't his time to do this, so I looked for another one, and in that case I found Steve Noon, and I asked Steve, you make lovely paintings, how do you that also for other people? And his answer was yes. I had 3 ideas in my head for paintings, and the first one, of course, was Graebner, the killing of Graebner, or the death of Graebner, and here you see how it works. You go to the left upper corner. That's a sketch made by my friend Martin Zwarts from the books Autumn Gale and Kampfgruppe Walter. He's also, in his working life, he was illustrating, painting new houses and that kind of stuff. So he can easily make a sketch like that. And with that, Steve goes on like the sketch in the left under corner, and that goes on to what you see on the right with all kinds of questions and remarks, and was very lovely to work with Steve with it. And what's very important in that, in cases like this, is that you learn from each other. And that's what I liked about Steve. He was not stubborn at, if I said, Steve, sorry, but that wheel has to go more to the right, it doesn't matter. He understands that. And sometimes he pushed me also in the right direction, that he said, yeah, Marcel, you want to do that in this way, but it's maybe better on that way. And I like that very much. I hope to use him also in the next book, but the problem is that lasts around 10 years, I think. So we will see what happens then. Here you see him working on the painting. Yeah, very lovely. Also, a nice detail. Maybe some read it. The bridge is red. That's primer paint. They were still not painted, busy painting the bridge before the battle started.
I don't think I knew that. I mean, until I read your book, I think that was one of the things I my memories. So many of the images, obviously black and white. You have a kind of a black and white image of World War II, but I don't think I knew that. And the paintings for me give a bit of they give some color to the book, but they also give a little bit of an interpretation of your interpretation, in the sense that you have been using all these documents to provide information, and then from that you can now kind of speculate. It's like a crime scene reconstruction. You're saying, based on information, this is what I imagine this little part of the battle looked like. This is how it unfolded. So it gives the reader a bit of an idea to kind of place themselves in the locations where you don't have the photos for. Brilliant stuff.
Here we have the second one. That was the Jagdpanzer IV near the entrance of the Park de Brink, near the prison in Arnhem, the west of Arnhem. Here also you see on the left bottom a sketch of Martin, which resulted in the sketch above from Steve. And on the right you see some detail information. Let's go on. And what I also do is I gave Steve some photos of the real life situation after the battle. You see on the left, you see the 6-pounder in the gate. On the right, you see the hole in the wall and the prison behind it. And I made a scale model from it, and to show him the right angle and the details. And that all helped Steve to make the painting as it became. And here you see also, it's also nice on this painting that it was already finished. That was the painting on the right. That was the finished painting. And then, to my error, I saw I made a big mistake, because you see the head of the loader coming out on the right, and the loader never comes out during the battle, but the commander does. So Steve had to correct the painting, as you can see it on the left. Things that happens, no problem. He corrected lovely, and it's become a very nice painting in my point of view. Also, here you see the concrete layer of concrete on the Jagdpanzer I talked about early on, and it shows very well on the painting.
Yeah,
it was a difficult one. It was one of the breakthrough attempt of Kampfgruppe Spindler in Oosterbeek at the end of September the 25th. And what I want to show was the King Tiger in action against British anti-tank gun. But as you see, we have multiple options, and it didn't work out. And Steve was very patient and gave me all of kind of options, and I needed that because I didn't know what to do with it. And in the end, I find this photo and Steve draw the sketch like on the right under corner, and yeah, no 6-pounder, but a beautiful setting. Of course, you have to read what is happening here, and in the end, it's a lovely painting, and it gives a good idea what happens. The tiger is hit many times. They put in action 3 tiger tanks, and all were very bad hit. And one was, of course, knocked out. Everyone knows that, knows the photos of that knocked out tiger tank. There's another one of this, and this one survived, but was badly damaged. And in the background, you can see it. There was a third king tiger also damaged, but was stowed away after the battle. When in Eerste, what I said, first 3 paintings, but I love the work from Steve so much that I thought, yeah, maybe we do a 4th painting, and we did. That was the Wolf Hazen painting. Also an interesting situation, because on the background you see a gun tractor and a 17-pounder, and I like the combination. What's also a very nice thing is that in the other paintings we have guys in camouflage, and in this painting there's one person and one soldier in camouflage, and the rest is in green, because if you look through the photos in the Oosterbeek and Arnhem battles, most of the guys were green and not camouflage. You see all kind of information I gave Steve to see the colors, like the sign about the polling there in the railway, the building plan of the station building, surroundings, and so on and so on. You go from sketch to a beautiful painting.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
Yeah. Terrible situation, but beautiful paintings. Eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. Film footage also used in the book. Of course, we know most of us know the films of the Wochenschau, or from the newsreel from the British. Also, thanks to another friend of mine, Marcel from Hobbe, who's working in television business, he got his hands on very good quality films of the newsreels from the British and the Wochenschau and other things. And he opted for me to make very good quality stills from film footage. And if you see what we get, is this. From every single movie still, we have a picture, so we can choose what is best. And this is only a little option from one scene. What you get is this. 2 beautiful pictures of a movie from a few seconds. This is in Roermond, Panzerwagen 4 of 10th SS, driving from the south to the north. And I think very interesting for my readers. And you have the same like this, shooting Flakwagen from Kampfgruppe Kraft, of battalion, so I said wrong, SS Battalion Kraft, shooting his way around. This is a setting in the Wochenschau. And here you have some beautiful picture of it. That's what my slideshow, Paul.
Well, I mean, brilliant stuff, Marcel. And there are a couple of questions, although we've been kind of answering as we've been going along. I think my big question is, with Arnhem, going back to what I said at the beginning, everybody has an opinion. It's one of those battles, you gather a group of modelers and reenactors and historians, and you say, so what went wrong at Arnhem, and they've all got an opinion on it. So everyone writing a book about Arnhem starts to explain where it went wrong or what they should have done, or of course it all went wrong there. What you're really doing is just presenting lots and lots of detailed facts. So you're not trying to say to people what you think the point is. It's just layers of information. So obviously the people who love modeling will want to get the book. The people who like German Armour, the people who want the detail of the maps there. But in terms of the people who are studying the Battle of Arnhem, the people who still scratch their heads about what went wrong and what could have been done, were there any conclusions you came to in the research that you think, of course, people should be aware of? Give us a couple of the things that your takeaways.
Yeah, this discussion I had with some people. Some readers like to have an end note in a book from what went wrong, what went good, and I'm very humble in this kind of things because I was not there. I'm just investigate the subject. to say he did that wrong and he did that wrong, and that's not my place to be. Of course, I have my opinion, and that's also in my commercial, because in my commercial is of course, when the Battle of Arnhem started one day later, they succeeded, and I hold on that. Of course, it's wishful thinking. I know that it is, but if you go and look to the information we have, yeah, it's almost certain when they landed one day later, the operation at Arnhem succeeded. If they could hold Arnhem, I don't know, because the Germans at that time were very strong, and maybe they broke through the defense of the British anti-tank guns. But we know that is of course written in my book down, that all the problems the British came through when they tried to advance to Arnhem were pinned down on some very small units. What I learned from some people, like some experienced military, what's the difference was between the British and the Germans in the beginning, that the troops from Kampfgruppe 9 SS were still in their battle mood, as they call it. So they were retreated from Normandy, France. They were still between the ears in battle mood. They were very tensioned and very strict. The guys from Britain, the British who wanted to advance to the bridge, had to get in that mood. They weren't in that mood. So for every shot they heard, they go in cover. I also will do that when I hear a shot. Everyone will do that. That's not a point of criticism. That's normal life. And that kind of mindset, I think that was the problem in the first hours, why it didn't succeed. And of course, all other kind of small problems. But the guys, the German soldiers in the half tracks from Aufklaringsabteilung 9 were very experienced, and they did know exactly what to do. A year before, they had an exercise in France before they were sent to Russia, how to deal with air landing troops. So they just rolled out the book what they have learned, and that worked reasonably well for them. So I think that's the problem. But writing that down in my book, it's not my place to be. I'm just the guy who said, I found this, I found that, I think maybe that is what happened. And it's up to the reader what they want with it. And if they have another conclusion, it's up to them. But that's why I also, many times in my book, I show a line out of a document, out of a personal interview. I let the person or the document I let speak. And after that, if it's in German, I translate it, of course, in English. But I know when I write a book and I see something translated, I want to see the original thing. And that's why it's in two language in the book.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things about the Battle of Market Garden is that maybe it's a battle that has been written about using secondary sources a lot. We have such compelling books, General Urquhart's book, things like that. James Gavin wrote about what was in Nijmegen, and maybe there's been a tendency to use those accounts and the veterans who spoke about things, which have produced some fantastic books, but it maybe hasn't been as forensic as other battles have been looked at. And I think that essentially, I think to put what you said into a different way is that you're the detective putting the information together. It's down to the lawyer, the solicitor, to build a case. What historian may want to conclude from your research? Okay, they may say that the movement of German armor should have been concentrated here, or maybe they moved too fast or too soon, or the British. What you're basically doing is saying, here's what the facts tell us. Here's what the documentation tells us about these movements. Here's where these units first met each other. These are the maps that explain that. And then, as you say, it's over to the historians to then say, okay, does that change my thinking about how the so-and-so brigade were getting on a particular part of the battle?
That's indeed up to them, and I hope to give them there some things for they can work with, and it's up to them. So it's my way of seeing history, and I always do it on this way because I feel comfortable with this, and it's my way of doing history.
Well, we did have a specific question right at the beginning of the show. Gary August says, does Marcel believe that the Panthers from SS Panzer Regiment 10 arrived in time for the fighting at Arnhem? Is there any photographic evidence of them, as there is some doubt on the subject?
No,
you're shaking your head quite firmly there.
Yeah, no, that's all the information from my, that was one of the mistakes in my first book. No, we now know for sure that the Panthers that were active near Elst were from a group that called Panther Company from the 9th SS, and they were under command of Fruman. I think he was a Hauptsturmführer, but I don't know for sure. That will be in my next book, but we now know for 100% sure no 10th SS Panthers. No, they were from the 9th SS.
Okay, thank you. And I think what you've kind of been suggesting to me is that this battle caught the Germans sort of halfway between the things. As you said, the 9th and 10th had come back from Normandy under strength, but in some ways their morale was quite high because a lot of them had escaped, as opposed to other units that didn't get out the Falaise Gap. And there was a certain predictability about the Germans in 1944. In Normandy, they always did a counterattack. They always did certain things. And I think, although the British and who are obviously jumping into Arnhem, we're not talking about the Americans in this particular conversation, they go in there with a plan.
Yeah.
It's not so much that the German armored divisions were there. It's the fact that the German armored units did things differently to perhaps we might have expected them to do, because we catch them in this transition and the like. The Germans had their troops in these little small independent units that function differently. Is that kind of a good assessment?
In basic, they were all on trains ready to leave to Germany. So when the alarm came, they unloaded first parts of it, later all what they want to use, and they were very flexible. They are, if you go you had, of course, there were guys from the Waffen-SS, and they were used to do things. Yeah. They were not. If you had a senior commander or lower commander on the Waffen-SS, and he got a victory by doing nothing, he didn't get promoted. If he came in for example, Corporal Butler, low in rank, he didn't get any order, but he just go to the point where he had to fight. He lost some of his men, but he was rewarded for that, because he didn't sit still. He did something, and that was very important within units of the Waffen-SS. And that you see, some guys ask me, what kind of commands, who gave commands, and in this kind of units, of course there were commands, but very little. That they acted almost independently. Not always, but most of the time. Yeah. If you see around the bridge, that was, of course, around the bridge, that was area from 10th SS. But Model visit every day to the units, goes to Knaust and other guys from, how are you doing? How is everything going? Yeah, you go on. You need something? Go on. So it's another structure we know of, and they were very flexible in it. And I think that's what's very important in the Battle of Arnhem. Later on, it was more Sturmen, because later on the Kampfgruppe of the battalion of the SS were strengthened with all kind of stuffs like Kriegsmarine, Luftwaffe. And of course, that was very difficult to handle with those guys. It was a harder situation for them.
Dr. Philip Blood summarized it quite well, his book about Aachen. The German NCOs often acted whereas officers waited for orders. He's talking specifically about the Battle of Aachen there, but I think Arnhem is your typical junior leaders battle. Some battles, it is all about the generals and what they decide on the map boards with their star, and some battles are sergeants and lieutenants and captains. And I think Arnhem on both sides is one of those battles. It's those junior people in a small engagement, making decisions quickly and on the fly, and how it panned out. And I think that is certainly the first couple of days of Arnhem. There's a lot of that.
Yeah, in the first couple of hours. Later on, of course, you had Kampfgruppe Spindler, and under his command you had Kampfgruppe Bartholomew and Kampfgruppe, not Kampfgruppe, SS Bataillon Bartholomew and SS Bataillon Müller, and later on, of course, Bataillon Brun. And that was a very strict structure, and those guys lead their units very well. That you see in everything. But that was later on. Of course, in the beginning, the groups were very small. Yeah, that's
well,
correct.
we will leave things there. I will hold up the copy of the book again. The website, your website is in the description below. They can buy the book directly from you if they're in Europe, or they can buy it online. But yeah, absolutely fantastic book. I said to you before I did this show, it's in my top 5 books. I mean, I still love Martin Middlebrook's book. I did also enjoy Al Murray's book, but your book is now up there, just if for no other reason, loads and loads of maps. And I've never ever had a book where I've quite had my satisfaction of maps reached like you. I think John Marshall in his 1942 book, I think, has 124 maps or something like that. But normally there's never enough maps. So thank you so much. Please, folks, I absolutely urge you to go and get this one. Yes, it's an investment. It's big, thick, glossy paper, but you will absolutely get something out of it if you like the Battle of Arnhem. So there we are. Thanks, everybody. We're back again tomorrow. Anthony Tucker-Jones is talking about the Germans defending the Rhineland. Then Mark Milner is on Friday talking about Allied command problems in Normandy, the relationship to the Allies are there. And I've just scheduled a new show. Steve Clay is back on to talk about the US 1st Infantry Division on Saturday, pushing over the Ruhr and the Rhine. So more German content. So thanks, everybody. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody. Bye.